I know you can't see me, I apologize for that, but I'm Sky McFarland. I work for the McKinney Center, and we're an arts and community center, but this is one of our community events. And we're excited to get to hear some real stories from real people that live right here in our community. And we are coming to you from the Gillespie building, which is where the food pantry is in Jonesborough. It's named for Elmer Gillespie, who has done a lot of service for this town with food pantry, and was an alumni of the Booker T. Washington School, which is where the McKinney Center is located. So we've got all kinds of connections going on there. So we're excited to hear from Ed Wolff and Walter Buford this evening, and I'm going to let Katelyn and Michelle take over from here. Please use that chat, ask us questions, say yes if you agree, and hope you enjoy.
Hi, everyone. It's Katelyn and Michelle. We are not the subjects of the conversation this evening. We get to moderate together tonight, and we're very excited to have two wonderful gentlemen who are quite busy in our community. And I'm going to go ahead and flip this camera around and introduce these two gentlemen, and they can tell us a little bit about themselves. So tonight we have Walter Buford. Give us a wave, Walter. And then we also have Ed Wolff, which both, Ed, you guys live in Jonesborough, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, both are Jonesburians. And if you don't know these men, you are about to find out a little bit more about them. So Walter, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself? What brought you here?
Well, I'm a native Charlatan. Came here back in '95 by way of the VA. I was a patient at the VA. And I kind of grew to like the area. So I stayed on this side of the hill, as we call it. But kind of settled in over here, and the people here appear to be a little different on this side of the mouth than the other, and it just kind of worked with my retirement plan, you know, to kind of chill and take life a little easier. So it has worked for us, and the things that go on in the community, we've found ourselves being part of, and it's been a good experience. So that's kind of basically how I got here.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And now, Mr. Wolff, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Something we don't know. I'm just messing with you.
Well, I might start out by saying I'm a racist.
Okay.
I didn't meet my first black person until I was 30. And I was raised in the Midwest, where in a suburb of Chicago. I was told by a barber, we don't let blacks in here after 6 o'clock at night. My parents, you never heard the N-word. But as I reflect back on my youth and that, there was racism. And heck, I didn't know what white privilege was. I didn't know what white supremacy was. I really didn't know that until maybe 3-4 years ago. Taking a lot of education, a lot of experience, and a lot of talking to this guy.
Well, that's shockingly wonderful. Thank you for sharing. You jumped right in there. I appreciate it. I was like, you can't see, I've got my mask on, but my jaw dropped. I was like, he went there.
I'd like to add to kind of have you elaborate on that, because you said you're a racist. Yeah. I want you to be able to walk amongst the black community later.
Yeah.
So
you might want to.
How would you describe yourself as a racist and being the Ed Wolff that I know? How do those two?
I'll give you an example. Walter and I talked about this. There was a person who posted on Facebook that she was very disturbed over the George Floyd death. And I've been working with Black-White Dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Walter, we become close. And I said to myself, is that the guy from Minneapolis? George has a name. He's just not from a place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we do with a lot of Black people. They're not names, they're not people, they're something. And that's still in my psyche. I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other things Walter and I have shared. But getting to be close to Walter, I can release those to a person who's Black, and we can talk about it.
And that's where the change starts.
That's where it's. Let me just mention one thing, and I don't want to get off the subject, but I was listening to the equity and inclusivity seminar that was put on at ETSU. And the gentleman from the Human Resources in charge of it, I think, made the comment, you can educate the mind, you cannot educate the heart. You have to experience it. And that's what white people have to do.
Well, hopefully this will shine some light and provide some education and hearing about some experiences that you all have shared and, getting to witness this conversation. Hopefully that will help some folks
Let's hope.
make that turn tonight, or at least enable some people to be able to speak out and be, a better co-conspirator versus an ally. We're past the allies. That's something I learned from the diversity and inclusion
There
thing.
you go.
So I know you jumped right in that you have, Ed, you didn't meet a Black person until you were 30 years old. Walter, how was growing up for you? Did you grow up in a diverse situation with white folks, or what was it like for
I grew
you?
up in a segregated South. Matter of fact, my class in 1965 was the last Black class to graduate. After then, in 1966, it was integration. And from that time, I would say for the next 3 to 4 years, there was total chaos in school. There was not much learning because I still had a lot of family in school. And there was so much fighting, and plus the busing came along, which meant that Blacks and whites were being bused to get in schools. Okay, so the whole thing changed as far as the school system, and there was no settling down, like I said, until around the early 70s. There was not much learning going on because there was always fights. There was fights in the school. There was fights on the buses, going back and buses going in certain neighborhoods. The buses would get rocked and stoned and stuff. So it was just chaos for, like I said, about at least 3 to 4 years. And some of the sports, we had one of the best sports teams in the area. At that time it was 4A, and we won a lot. But after the integration, people all seem to have lost a lot of their pride. It was just a mixture of anger, hate. The same thing we're seeing today is what went on in 65 or 66. It's just more of it because it's across the nation. But going to a segregated school was, and I didn't realize it at the time, was a blessing. we understood each other. We didn't have to pretend we knew whether we liked a person or not, and it had nothing to do with the color of the skin because everybody was black. It had to do with the personality. So, and during that time frame, we had parents who instilled principles in us. So we knew how to act. We had manners. We had all the things that the building blocks of a good human being or person to prepare them for the work. After the fact, and you know, I didn't have a whole lot of time between there, and I don't know if I needed, I don't know how much time we got to do this, but
Plenty.
But after I graduated, I had about a year, not even quite a year, the Vietnam War broke out. So my class was hit really hard. My graduating class was hit really hard. And a majority of them went to Vietnam. And believe it or not, a lot of the black soldiers were put on the front line, plain and simple, for a reason. There's a lot of controversy about the Vietnam War, why it was, but it has been said in more ways than one that it was a war to make money. And they did make a lot of money. The Johnson made money. The President Johnson, well, his wife had a lot of companies and things that worked out in Vietnam and made money. They actually made money, not just her, but we did not actually fight a war to fight a war. We really had no business there, and it's been proven more times than one. But needless to say, when that was over and we came back home in 1968, come from one war in the jungle to another war in the streets of America. So we didn't have time to settle down and try to see what we could do as far as our families, and just settle down. So, like I said, they killed Martin Luther King, so that you know what happened after then, or during that time frame. I was still on the post or on the base, and the people who worked on the base, the white people, could not get off the base because they were getting stoned, rocks thrown at them and stuff like this. So they had to bed down on the base that night until they could get things lined up tomorrow for the next day. So anyway, all of this happened with the civil rights. I mean, this was during the time frame of all of this unrest. What you see today, that's what was happening then. The Vietnam War, the civil rights, all of this kind of combined from 66 to early 70 was an upheaval. And things started leveling out a little bit toward the middle 70s and so forth and so on. But we never earned any rights per se. They made some, Martin Luther King made some progress. There were some doors open. And those same doors were closed as we move forward. Because, as you know, he was taken away, and most of the people during that time frame that were leaders in the civil rights movement, they either had to get out of the country or lose their life. There were some people who moved over in, well, they didn't give a name of it, but they went to Europe. And some of those people came back in the 70s. And I won't call any names right now. Yes, I will. Dick Greg was one of them that finally got a chance to come back. And he was always promoting blacks and trying to uplift the human condition for the black. So what we're seeing today is basically a repeat of what we had 50 some years ago. The difference today is there is more white people that have joined hands and marching with, hopefully to try to see a change, which makes it so much different because we could only last for so long, because when we was out there by ourselves, they would do anything to us. I mean, they're basically doing anything now, but at least there are some white children of some people who have positions that keep some of the pressure off of them doing all of what they would do if it was us by ourselves. Mm-hmm. So in hopes that this will come to some type of head, and with me saying this, it would be wonderful to see where some of the white people and where some of their conscience is, the ones who have power. They see the problem. Are they going to do anything about it? Or are we going to have to continue to suffer like we've been suffering for all of these hundreds of years? And I think I'm going to stop there because I don't want it to be a whole.
Listen, you might need to get you a stool and have story time. Oh, goodness. Well, thank you for sharing that. My goodness. So we've got questions, of course, for you all, but this is supposed to be an organic conversation between you two, and we just kind of prompt you along. But your story, Walter, is incredibly intense. Ed, when you were growing up, did you feel any pressures? How Walter said that he didn't have the opportunity to be able to settle down, and it was just, bouncing from one tumultuous thing to another.
No, I got anything I wanted when I wanted it. But I think the difference for me is getting into a friendship with Walter, along with other Black people, and hearing their stories. You can read all you want. You can have all the events, the candle lights and everything you want. They're good. Mm-hmm. They're helpful. But until you build the trust with a person of color so that you can talk freely with them and they can talk freely with you, will you hear the stories? Will you hear the pain? Right now, talking to people with what happened in Louisville with Breonna, I'm hearing a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine those who are listening right now who are white don't know the anguish that is going on with Black people because they identify with it. Mm-hmm. It shows the lack of hope, the lack of respect as a human being, and the way the justice system works against them, so that we can all live in this nation that we believe in. And that's the pain I carry now, and I have to carry it.
Shoo. When you were growing up, Ed, in your history classes, did you learn what was the extent of any Black history? Was it just, glazed over or not even acknowledged at all?
Well, I think we talked about there were slaves, but you didn't hear the real stories about slavery, right, and the meanness. George Custer was a hero. Mm-hmm. Okay. You heard about the Trail of Tears. But you didn't hear about the desire of Andrew Jackson to want to annihilate the Native American nation.
Mm-hmm.
All those guys. It was all rosy, and we were a great nation, and we did everything. And I'll probably digress just a second because of that. I have a very good friend that's a conservative, and I used to have articles in the Johnson City Press called Community Voices. I used to talk to him, and he used to say, good subject, good conversation. And then I put one out that this nation was formed on slavery and genocide. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And until we as a nation say, yes, that's what's happened, that's who we are, but we can be better, we're going to still be struggling with Walter and I struggle with every day, and you and everyone else struggles with.
Yeah. To heal, acknowledgement, accountability, and healing. And
The
then you can
wound
move
has to
forward.
be healed from the inside.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Now, Walter, I've got the same question for you, and you mentioned that you went to a segregated school. So I'm very curious, what was history like in your classes at the segregated all-Black school?
They touched on slavery.
Mm-hmm.
They made us aware that when they brought us over, and that they had slaves in the South. I mean, it was just really glossed over with no depth. And we really didn't find out much about Black history until we came back from Vietnam. And most of the guys, well, some of the guys had families when they went over, and some got family when they came back. But long story short, we didn't get a chance to go to college or any type of prep school. Like I said, we just went almost directly into the service. So, but anyway, we ended up in a community college in our general area because at the time, we didn't have funds to break out and go to. As a matter of fact, at that time, we didn't have a whole lot of colleges to go to. And the biggest thing, we didn't have funds. So the community college was a thing to go to, and we all kind of ended up there. And we realized that we had not learned very much about Black history. We learned a lot in Vietnam with some of the white guys that we fought with. We talked about things because they were from all different parts of the country. And we learned a lot, and we realized that we were just as dumb as horses, as far as Black history was concerned. So we wanted the school to facilitate some type of Black history so we could learn about ourselves. Of course, we got pushed back, but we had enough Vietnam veterans there that was putting money into the school that they had to recognize and deal with our request. So they decided to do that. And I shared with Ed about this, they put this Black history class in place. And oh man, we was all happy and all this kind of good thing, we could learn some things about ourselves. We rolled up in class, and they got this little young white girl as a teacher, younger than we are, and we was in our 20s. So how in the world can a white girl teach us anything about Black history? But that's what we had, that's what they gave us. And she had an attitude, of course, and we had a big one. So we pretty much all but flunked out, although what she was trying to talk about, she had no experience. And we tried to share with her how things happen and how they work. And this annoyed her because she didn't have experience. And a lot of the guys would get upset. So long story short, we all barely got out of that class with Black history grade. But we did learn some things because we had books. The first Black textbook was written by John Hope Franklin. When we was in school, we didn't have a Black textbook. But John Hope Franklin wrote the first one. And we learned from the book itself. We had the material that we could actually study for ourselves. So, and that gave us somewhat of a foundation to know some of what went on, back in the day and bring it up to that present time. So, what we learned in high school, to answer your question, not very much. Most of what we learned, we have had to do our own research, which even today, there's not a lot of Black history being taught. I asked my grandkids, what are you being taught? Who are you being taught about? And one of my young grandkids told me, said, learn about George Washington Carver. I said, well, good. I said, well, what did he do? He learned how to make peanut butter. What? Peanut butter? I mean, this is what they're teaching our kids. I was so outdone. And a couple of them, they mentioned a couple of things, but nothing really of any depth. They just kind of glossed it over. We thought we didn't get any teaching. But what they're teaching our young Blacks now is just ridiculous. So that's kind of who we are with that. And hopefully we can get more Black history in school, especially at the lower level, because our Black kids don't know who they are. They've been exposed to the situation that they're in now for so long, they have no clue where they come from or how they got here, or that they are Black, so to speak, and there's a certain undercurrent that's not going to allow them to do some of the things that they think they can do as easily as they may think. So our children need to know who they are, where they are, and where they stand.
I like to piggyback on that. And that helps with the friendship that Walter and I have. Is one time I was talking to him, he said, "Do you ever go back in the history of Africa?" And he gave me a book, author, long name, but the last name is Diop. Yeah. From Senegal. And he is laying out the fact that Western Europe made Egypt white. And some people that are listening know I'm a minister, and I do read scripture quite a bit. And as I'm going through this history of Egypt and a place called Nubia, which is Ethiopia and the Sudan, all of a sudden dawns on me, which I never thought of before, and no religion teacher or anyone has ever shared that with me. From the time of Abraham through Jesus, Egypt is a dominant nation in Scripture, and it's Black. And there's a story in Acts where this apostle Philip is baptizing and teaching about Jesus to a eunuch, by the way, was the gay person, the homosexual of the time, Jesus, and a treasurer of the Candace. And all of a sudden I'm saying to myself, that's a specific article. The Candace. The Candace was the name in Nubia and Egypt and Ethiopia of the princess. No, not the princess, the empress. So here we have in scripture, black, female, none acceptable person, all wrapped up in one person. And all we talk about is the fact that that person was baptized. That's the kind, and there is such a rich history of black people in the empires before.
Did you buy an iPhone or did you buy a phone?
If you share that with ministers in this community, what response, very, very specific, like you just said, what kind of response do you think you would get from ministers in this area?
You
Did you
want-
buy a phone on it?
The truth.
That's interesting, Ed, thank you.
500.
That's it.
Yeah.
If I can piggyback on that just a little, ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet, if we were to drill down and go back into the history of civilization, not just black or white, but go back to civilization and find out who was who and what was what, I think we will come to realize where we all come from and the status of blacks as a race that have changed totally over thousands of years. And my understanding is the European nation have found ways to put the Egyptian culture and that whole race underfoot in a matter of thousands of years. Now the supreme class of people or race of people are white. We are led to believe that whites actually have brought this world of civilization to where it is. The world was black. And like Ed was saying, initially, black people in Africa was the first. And they were intelligent, highly motivated, and in order to have power, my understanding is that the European, over a period of time, found ways to subdue the black race and take the power and the resources. Africa is the richest continent in the world. That's where we all come from. So if Africa is taken by all the other nations, starting with the white and all the other nations, and put us in a subservient position, pretty much all over, then that puts us at the bottom of the totem pole. The white race or the European race maintain power, resource, all the resources, the power in America is owned and operated by white people. Let me say it again. All the wealth, power, and let me add government of the United States is run by white people. And until that changes, until there is some consciousness of the oppression that we receive as black people changes, and white people or European come to the realization that Black people are human. Although my understanding is we're still 3/5 of a person in the Constitution. So until things are changed in laws, in which I plead that the white people with conscience make an effort, and white people with power that say that they follow Christ do something for humanity, not just Black, but humanity. If they do what they say that they are doing to follow Christ, humanity becomes no color. They will do the right thing. So until we are able to touch and reach the heart, as Ed said early on, it has to be a heart thing. And people have to care. And when that time comes, and enough people that walk along together and side by side, change some of the laws, because we live by the laws, especially the Black. We have to live by the laws. Europeans make the laws for us to live by. So that has to change in order for us to be able to breathe.
Let me mention about the heart versus the mind from my own experience. As a minister, I went through the seminary for 4 years. At the end of my first year during the summer, I had to take what was called clinical pastoral education. And I picked the prison system. Every week we would meet with the chaplain students, seminary students, to share. They were trying to draw us out the emotions and everything. I couldn't get over the high degree of Blacks that were in the prison. 85, 90%. In fact, I crashed during one of those sessions when we talked about it. Did I do anything? No. I went back to being a seminary student. I had a contract to be a minister at an all-Black small Lutheran congregation. Now, couple things I did. My first, I've showed this to Walter, my first baptism was a little Black child. And I am extremely proud of that. And I taught Black kids. And the one good thing I did is there's a quote in scripture that says, where Jesus says, "Who do you say that I am?" And the bulletin cover had Jesus picture blue-eyed and white. And I apologized to the congregation. And one of the key people in that small congregation just slid it over, and I've come to understand why. Don't ripple, don't make any waves. So, and there's a couple other places I did, but I didn't do anything. I mean, I felt like I'm checking off the fact that I'm not a racist, okay, but until charged. And then I read an article, I started reading articles about it, and then I read an article and it said, "You are a racist if you think white is normal." And in my gut, I had to raise my hand. And that changed my heart. But until people change their hearts, it ain't gonna happen. Because we know how to rationalize. We know how to logically accept things, or we know how to just put them out of our mind until something happens that we can't do it in.
Ed, we know you're a minister, and Walter, you've talked about Christianity as well. What are your thoughts on the phrase that Sunday is one of the most segregated days of the week? With churches always, not always, but a lot of them, white church, black church. What are your thoughts on that and in this community?
It is. I got our Sunday school class to agree to go to a black congregation at Walter's congregation. 10 of us went. And Frankie and I said, dear God, I hope we just sit among the people. Guess what happened? All the white people sat together. And I was a little uncomfortable because the way black people worship is a lot different than the way white people worship. But after a length of time, it dawned on me. At least this is my perception. I have no white people worship with this. Black people worship with their heart. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which many people know, found his faith in the Abyssinian church in New York City, worshiping among the blacks.
I don't know that person. So who is that person?
Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German who did not believe in killing, and he agreed to be in a conspiracy to assassinate Hitler. And he was hung 5 days before the war was over, naked. But he formed what was called the Confessional Church. I'm a Lutheran. 85 to 90% of the Lutherans in Germany followed Hitler.
Look him up.
He was a martyr. So,
Walter, what are your thoughts on that? Sunday is a most segregated day of the week. Yes, sir.
Well, it's just, it's the way it's been. We have accepted segregation for so long that it's just automatic. It's just accepted as a way of life. Some folks try to do a little integrating and go, they invite whites, blacks, so forth and so on. But it never takes a hold, so to speak. Some churches do pretty good. I've noticed some churches in this area have some mixed congregations. And it appears to work pretty good. But as a whole, segregation has maintained its grip on black congregations. And they feel more comfortable with their own. And so the white feel more comfortable with their own. Now, I'm saying this because what I see, I don't know this for a fact. I'm assuming or presuming that whites feel more comfortable with a congregation of their own kind. I would think if they didn't, they would have more people. We've been segregated so long that it's hard to make that adjustment. Number one, we as Ed said, we worship differently. We got a little bit more emotion than white folks. I mean, that's just the way it is. We just more emotion. We feel what we do. We are more spiritual. And is that a good thing? I think so. I think it's all about the spirit. We are spiritual beings. So the more spiritual we are, I think the the closer we can get to our Creator, who is God. So how that will play out in time to come, I don't know. But I think a lot of pastors and preachers are willing to embrace different cultures in their churches. So I guess it's something we'll just have to see how it works out and hope for the best.
I'd like to add something to that. Walter and I have been communicating for a couple of years. I think the friendship has been cemented because of our spiritual discussions. Now, take this as a progressive, white, mainstream minister visiting with a black elder who has more fundamental beliefs from Scripture. And if that doesn't give me hope, I don't know what does. I mean, there's no reason he and I should be friends. Except we work at it. And I'll add one other comment that if there's any ministers, white ministers especially, who are there, although Walter and I have talked about it, when you're a minister and you've got a family and you need a salary and a pension and a medical coverage, are you going to upset the congregation? Oh. And if the congregation is uncomfortable with people of a different color, they're going to keep their mouth shut. That's reality. And until we can get through that, you're going to have churches that will not encourage what says in the first chapter of Scripture. Let us make humanity in our image. And there was no color defined by that.
All right. We did something this month that is a little different. We asked you both to come up with a couple questions for each other. And so you sent them to us. And so I'm going to remind you of these questions. And we're going to, we also have a few questions in the chat here, which we'll get to those at the end. There's some very good questions here. We've got about 10 minutes here. So let's keep the answers crisp. And these are some hard hitters, so just do your best. Y'all came up with them, so this is not Walter, your questions for Ed. So this is directed at you, Ed. Why are white people so mad? In your opinion,
And I
obviously.
think Walter also asked me, why do white people hate black people?
He wrote, why can't white people be honest about how they feel about black people?
Because they'd have to look at themselves to begin with. And they'd have to recognize what has been going on in this nation for 400 years. And they would have to give up privilege and supremacy.
All right.
Is that crisp enough?
That was very crisp. That was to the point. All right. Walter, this question is from Ed. Let's see here. Why are there so few black people that participate in the black-white dialogue?
Well, the average, I would presume, the average black person at this stage of the game needs to see some action. I understand the black and white dialogue. I understand we have to dialogue before we can do much of anything. We have to know what we're doing. We have to know why we're doing it. So black and white dialogue, I think, is a good platform by which to get understanding. We have to get understanding before we can actually do anything. But the average, my take is the average black person have been in a position so long without that they don't want to talk no more. They want to see something happening positive. They just don't want to talk anymore. What are you going to do for us or with us? And until we can come up with something like that, I mean, something where the rubber hits the road, or something put in place that blacks can actually see some gain. We see no gain. We only see detriment to our society, our black society. And I gotta say this, while I'm on this, I'm just totally hurt by what went on yesterday, last night. I'm trying to get through that. Brianna. But until we see a change or some difference in the structure of our society, it is hard to just sit around and talk. And I know that what Ed's doing, it has a good place and a good foundation, and it means well. But we have to do something a little bit more than talk and make plans. Now, we have the foundation of the black-white dialogue. Now, what do we lay on top of that? What do we do? We have talked for a long time. And it's not that people don't know what needs to be done. Some do, because some white Americans do not know that they are or have the position that they have, which is privilege. They don't realize that. So the dialogue helps the white as well as the black to understand, but mostly the white to understand their privilege. I have talked, since we talked about this, I have questioned some white people who I thought were on the up and up about what their position is as far as what's going on today. And they seem to think that everything is all right, and we need to get our stuff together. We should get our stuff together. They see no harm in what's going on and how it's going on, or how it came about going on. They don't even look at that part. You all need to get your all stuff together. So how do we break through that? So that's kind of where we are. And until we can make that happen, and people that have the power admit that they are privileged and that they are racist, things will not change for the blacks. And I'm saying blacks because we are a group of people. We are native Black Americans, period. We were born, raised here, built the country for the most part on the backs of the black. We are due something other than jail. We are due education. We are due reparations. We are due some things in order for us to be able to lift ourselves above where we have been put. It is time. It has been time. And until our white brothers and sisters are willing to join in and make a change in this nation, then I'm afraid of what's going to happen in the interim.
I agree. I agree.
Mhm.
What do you think about this generation that's out there now? The Generation X, I think, is the Z, Generation Z. How do you think their impact is going to support what you're saying?
I'm actually proud of them to be out there as long as they have and willing to take whatever it is that they have to take. I say again, I'm proud of them, but it took this for them to see. Because before this happened, we couldn't share with the generation after us what it was like and what we are still living in. Only when this happened were they able to understand and reflect back to what we've been trying to do all along. Now we all see, and the door has been opened to the closet, to that dark closet that has been protected for the last 40, 50 years. The newer generation didn't see any of that because they've been in school and they've been going down the road with the white generation. So they didn't see any of that. So if they didn't experience it, they can't relate to it. But now, the cat's out the bag. The attitudes are out the bag. We see the raw supremacists and all the other groups that could care less about us. And let me just say this. When we were slaves, they needed us. And I say they, the white population or the slave masters. Now, there's no more need for slaves, but we are still dependent on the master. So with all these numbers of blacks in this country, one of the reasons why so many of us are being shuttled or herded to the prison system, because they have nothing else for us to do that they want us to do. So they funnel us into the prison system or wherever else that's demeaning. It's hard for us to get an education. It's hard for us to raise ourselves up because it's hard to borrow money. It's hard for us to do anything in this society. It's hard for us to do. So we catch the brunt of all of the unnecessary oppression, as it would be. And as long as we receive that and we don't do anything, and getting back to your question, I am proud of the young generation that's out there, that's been out there so long, and that's persisting that something be done.
Okay, so we got the thumbs up that we're going to go a little bit past 8 o'clock. So I've got one other question. Walter, you answered your second question for Ed yourself, of what could our white sisters and brothers do to aid in the understanding and the plight of the African American community, and what can we do to change it? You destroyed your own question with a wonderful answer. So we're going to move to Ed's final question, which was, from your perception, how segregated is the Jonesborough area community?
In all reality, I could not place Jonesborough any different than any other area in here or in the confines of the United States. Because anywhere we go, it's the same thing. Everywhere we go, it's the same thing. As long as you're in the borders of the United States, it's going to be the same. Mm-hmm. It's in the soul. It's this one movie star said a long time ago. It's in the soul. I'm going to count it because it's in the soul.
Baked in. Phew. Okay, So we've got a couple of questions from our lovely audience here. First of all, Ed, Noel, and Bob say hi, and I'm going to say hi to them as well. But their question is, what advice do both of you have to assist white citizens in taking a first step in understanding the personal experience of people of color and acting to make a change in our institutions? So that's kind of part of what you were saying, both of you have been saying, but do you have any further thoughts on that?
Not really. I could promote black-white dialogue. That's one vehicle. You can go to the anti-racist vigils. I was naive when I started black-white dialogue that I thought my personality is, is that what we got to do? We got to talk to the blacks? Well, okay, I picked up the phone. I talked to one guy who said, well, you need to talk to Bill Coleman. You need to talk to Ralph Davis. I picked up the phone, said, let's talk. I'm weird. Normal people don't do that. But we got to make that uncomfortable step forward. You can do anything you want to do. You can do all the education, all the reading, and there is a bibliography I give you that's 10 pages long. But until you sit down and with your heart open, build enough trust with people who are black to hear their story, you don't feel it. You just don't feel it. And then when you feel it, you got to do something.
Okay. Walter?
If we get really down to it, the powers to be local, state, and federal. But let's talk about local. There could be on the local government a department or a person that would represent the black people in the community, their needs, and how they can be addressed. And this should be part of our city, our county, and our town. There should be a black person, at least a black person, sitting on at least one on each board. And their agenda or their job is to present the needs of the black people of that community across the board. And then the council itself could take the recommendation and actually work on them specifically for the black people. We have been included in everything, and we end up getting nothing because we have so many minorities, and we have just been lost in the sauce. We need representation for black people, with the only ones being left behind. And it's because it has been so diluted with minorities. Minority this, minority that, minority, and you just go on and on and on. So everybody's getting a piece of the pie, of the crumbs I've shared with him. There's only the crumbs going to the minority, so to speak. And if you got a bucket full of minorities, guess how many crumbs the black people are going to get? Minorities started off as black people. That's how it started. But they have knocked everything into minorities now. And we have been pushed to the side again. So we need to be recognized as a black people on every board that has anything to do with the public, to make sure that we receive what we deserve as people. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. I hope y'all heard that.
Mhm.
All right, and then we have another question here to both of you. In what aspects of social and civic lives are there good opportunities to build bridges and make amends? How can you envision that happening?
The people in power are the ones that are going to have to envision that happen or have to see that happen. Two things. Some months ago, before the COVID, there was a huge promotion about Appalachian Highlands, and they brought all the people of power together.
Mm-hmm.
One black person was on the dais. And the only thing that black person did was introduce Joe Grante. I have heard this saying I love. Diversity brings you to the table. Inclusivity lets you talk. When people listen, you belong. And it's the people in power who have to welcome everybody to the table and give up their own, or they don't give up power. They increase power by having everyone at the table belonging.
I agree. It's a disadvantage to our whole society. Somebody said this too in the ETSU diversity and
Chucky
inclusion. That it's a disadvantage to everyone, that racism hurts everyone, because if you really did put forth, the brightest of the bright, and you were blinded and didn't know who was what, and it didn't matter where they were from, what they looked like, what color they were, then things would run smoothly. But when you're too busy trying to hold somebody down because of what color they are, where they're from, what they look like, their skin, which, P.S., just to remind everybody, nobody's got control over their gender or their color or any of that. I didn't shop around. Did you get to shop?
I didn't shop a bit.
Right. So when you do that, you're putting the entire society at a disadvantage.
Yep.
So
Entire organization, whatever group you're in, if you don't put the best of the best, regardless of physical characteristics, everybody loses out.
Yep.
I agree with that completely.
Shooting themselves in the foot. All right, let's see. We've got one more comment here. Someone said, Alfred Greenlee told me that Jonesborough became increasingly segregated after gentrification. The makeover of the town as historic, the change in format of Jonesborough Days, which used to host all churches on the steps, singing hymns, and Bethel was front and center. So he said that. That changed, though. As much as I love storytelling, its original branding and the development of a tourist economy was primarily focused on attracting white tourists. As an innkeeper in this town, I can say retweet. I agree 100%. I get so excited when I see black tourists. I almost, if I'm walking the dog, I walk up and introduce myself, or just make sure that I'm like, hey, how are you doing today? Half the time they'll ask me to take their picture, and then I let them know who I am, and that, if they're just passing through, to come back and they can stay at the inn, and that, I'm
The
here.
black community was not included in the storytelling development and the tourism. It was, and it still is today. It's the white person's
Pastime.
game in town. That's got to change.
Now they do, I'll play devil's advocate. They bring in the storytellers from, they keep it international.
And they put one black person on the BMA, and they name parks after black people. So what? And I'm not, I hope you're here. It's not denigrating the blacks. That's the crumbs.
Yeah.
That Walter's talking about.
Yeah. Someone else has commented and says, as it relates to this topic, who, from your perspective, are the model white leaders in our community? So I'm guessing you're asking who's doing it right, or at least giving the effort to. I think I'm correct in saying that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, I am right. Okay.
Would you be surprised when you say leaders, what kind of leaders? If they're the people at the top, I can't name one.
Mm.
Not one.
I concur.
Yeah, we've got a comment here that says the term powers that be abdicated and surrendered that we are the power. It is past time for us to vote out the white supremacy and then fix the rigged election system. Whew, yeah, Bob and Noel, speaking truth. Well, I feel like this evening has been nothing but calls to action and actually correcting some calls to action that, you know, it's far past time for the talking, as Walter, as you said. You know, maybe it should be the black and white action action night.
We are going to meet on October 5th to find the future direction of Black White Dialogue.
Wonderful. So it's going to be evolving.
Has to or else die.
All right.
And if I may say something with that, as I said, the black and white dialogue is good for introducing people who don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's necessary, but maybe something could be a spinoff or another segment of the black and white dialogue that would actually be an action part of that. I don't know.
It's also an opportunity for people who want to check off in their mind that they're not racist, so they go to the meetings and do nothing.
Mm-hmm. Phew. Well, does anyone have anything else that they'd like to share with us before we wrap it up here? Has y'all been driving home some truths tonight?
Yes,
I've thoroughly
really.
enjoyed this. We're
Been on
getting
the
some
train.
thank yous here. We need to have you guys
Yes.
back again.
This is amazing. Wonderful, wonderful.
We need a couple hours is what we need. Oh my goodness.
This is
Well,
great.
thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. I'm going to flip this around and Michelle and I are going to bid you adieu. Come on in here. Hi,
So,
everyone.
Do we have any plan of actions? Like what's coming up
Well,
next?
we'll call to actions. Ed let us know that the Black-White Dialogue is going to be meeting. Now, is that going to be public or is that just
We're still on Zoom. We're not meeting in October because of
COVID?
the candidate thing.
Oh, okay. So October 5th, it's going to be a Zoom Black-White Dialogue meeting?
No, it's
Oh.
usually the October 12th would be the second Monday of the month, but we're not meeting because
Of
the
candidate.
League of Women Voters and the press have set up a candidacy forum.
I
So
gotcha.
we're going to piggyback on them, and we'll be back in November, second Monday.
November, second Monday of November, first call to action, Black-White Dialogue. If you're just dipping your toe in the water and getting ready to get started, please tune in to the Black-White Dialogue with Ed Wolff. I've got a call to action. The deadline to register to vote is October 5th. If you have not, I'm sure everybody here tonight has registered to vote. Check your voter rolls, because my husband got a strange text today saying something about that his address was not valid. Check, just get on there and check.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter. We voted in the primaries a
Go
little bit
vote,
ago.
go vote TN, put it on your cell phone and you can check everything out. Make sure you're ready. And we got to vote. Early voting is coming up at some point. I don't want to give you dates because I'll be wrong, but
I
look
know.
those up.
Second week in
I don't
October. It's either October 14th or 15th.
Can I
So
add,
look them up.
can I add one call to action?
Please do.
When you all sit down at the Thanksgiving table with just small people, or a few people or a lot, talk about racism.
Ooh. Yeah.
Bring it up with your family. Have those awkward, uncomfortable conversations for sure.
And know where the exit door is.
Yes. Know where the exit door is and have the car running. I'm just playing. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. Please remember, of course, that Black lives very much matter. Also, please continue to say her name, Breonna Taylor. And please follow the McKinney Center and stay tuned as we will keep you updated on what's going to be happening next month with Conversations That Matter and who our guests will be, which we've
Figure it
got
out.
some options, but
It
let
could
us
be
know.
you.
Yeah, it could be you. Let us know any feedback you have. We are always graciously open to that. So you all have a wonderful night, and thank you so much for tuning in.